What's up, y'all? On today's episode of What the Hell Am I Up To Now? If you want to know how to add a heatsink and a fan to a Traxxas RC, especially specifically a HOSS 4x4 truck, I'm going to do that now. So to get started, obviously you're going to want to remove the battery, disconnect it, and I've disconnected the harness to the motor, and now we're going to remove this mount here. I'm using a 2mm hex wrench here. It almost feels like it might be standard. There's a little bit of play, but it works, and this is not under a lot of pressure, so it really doesn't matter. All right, that's removed. I'm gonna set that aside. Now this next one is going to be 2.5mm to remove this here. All right, so whenever I went to remove this other screw down here, also for the motor mount, I just found that it was easier to remove the motor controller, and kind of set that off to the side, so moved it over there for now. Now I'm finishing removing this last one, and we should be able to pull the motor out. Now, moment of truth, if this will actually come out. Let's find out. It will not yet, so something else is holding it in there. So we're going to try to remove these three here and remove this plastic piece off the top. I actually did not have to remove this plastic piece. As I was messing around with it, I pulled straight up and it started to slide out of place. So we're gonna get this out now through here, hopefully. There we go. And it's out. Now we gotta take these two screws out here, and that will allow us to get this plate out and slide the heatsink on. Now, one thing to note, these do have Loctite on the screws that I just pulled out of that motor mount. So I will go ahead and put some blue Loctite back on there whenever I put this back together. But let's get this heatsink slid on now. All right, I had to set the camera down for a little bit, and it did take some persuasion to get it started. But there we go, now we're cooking. Now we're getting it slid on there. So now that that is slid on, we're going to reinstall the motor mount plate. All right, so as I mentioned before, I added a drop of blue Loctite on each one of those. Now, one thing to note too is before you take the plate off, note the orientation. There were 4 holes on the motor, or you could do what I did and just go back in this video a little bit and see what that orientation is before you go to install this again. So let's get this motor back in here and get everything plugged up. All right, so one thing that happened is this screw that was down here was a pain in the butt to get it started. So I pulled the motor back out, got that started because I realized that this just rests on the plastic piece. So now we're going to try to get this worked in there. I don't know if you could see that. But, oh, yep, and it just falls into place. So now that that's there, we're going to install the other screw and go ahead and tighten this one up. So one thing I was worried about is that I might have to adjust backlash or something, or however you would say that in this case, where the gears are matched up correctly. But the nice thing is that piece actually, it looks like aligns that for this motor on the car, which is nice. Now, one thing to note though, I just got done struggling with trying to get that in there while the screw was in this plastic piece. And you can slip and slice your finger on the heat shrink. But one thing I found is that install this piece now without the screw in there, and then go ahead and lay this in there, and then we'll be able to get the screw started a little easier. All right, so now we have the big wires back in. Lay this fan on. I'm gonna screw this on to the heat shrink. The screws actually just go straight into the heat shrink. Then I'm gonna run this wire around and to one of the ports in here. First, I'm gonna go get my hand cleaned up, and then we'll be back with a battery and see if this thing rips. All right, so I went ahead and ran the wire through down here, and then I had to take this cap off to get the plug through there, and then I took this off to get it plugged in so it is provided power. So now that that's all done, and these screws, like I mentioned before, go into the heatsink. Now I'm going to plug in a battery, see if make sure that this comes on whenever I turn the car on, and then we're going to take it for a little drive. All right, so the battery is not fully charged, just because this is really just a test, but the controller is on. We're going to go ahead and hold this down. And the fan is moving. All right, so hopefully this will keep the engine temps down and will not end up causing any bearing issues within there because it was getting so hot. I don't have a mount or anything for my phone, so here's just a quick rip off the steps. Woo! thank you all for watching. I'm going to go play a little bit, even though it's raining. And yeah, have some fun. See you.